A family violence researcher says social media videos portraying animal cruelty as entertainment show just how widely accepted violence is in New Zealand. Two videos have surfaced this week. One features a possum being violently punched in the face, while the perpetrator is encouraged to do worse. The other shows a kitten being forced to inhale cannabis. Michael Roguski from the Kaitiaki Institute says there is a strong link between mistreatment of animals and family violence. He believes better training and sharing of information about animal cruelty between agencies could help stop domestic violence. I asked him how worried we should be about these animal videos.
Thankfully, we are now having a lot of discussion around family violence in New Zealand, and I think these are really good examples to further those discussions. Rather than family violence per se, there are examples of violence and cruelty as entertainment, and I think this speaks, well, for me at least, very clearly about how pervasive violence is in New Zealand, and within that, how we condone it. So I did a study a few years ago, and the use of power and control of the family through abuse of animals was strongly identified. So that was identified in terms of pets within the family. So there were an example of a puppy being killed as a way to keep the family in line through coercive control. But I also interviewed farmers, and their wives were being held under a coercive control regime because of threats to kill their sheep, their horses. So it's not just pets; it can be animals in general as a form of coercive control.
And can it be escalation, as in someone starts off being cruel to animals and then escalates to being cruel to other humans?
Yes, it can be, but it can also be the opposite. So what I identified in that study was that people who'd come to the attention of the police, they stopped hitting their children and their partner, and so they started abusing the animals because it's hard to detect abuse of animals. Yeah. And does that make sense?
Yeah, so and that's really interesting. That is really interesting. So are we making enough use of the information that we have when we see things like, videos on social media showing animal cruelty? How should we be using that information in terms of cross-referencing and protecting against family violence? And are we doing that?
Well, no, we're not. So the successes of late is the new Family Violence Act, which has put animal abuse very clearly up the front, and Jan Logi's been fantastic with that. When a few years ago, around 2012, the police, the courts, Oranga Tamariki or CYF at the time, and SPCA, they responded very well to the findings of the study, but I think there's been a change of management, and as things happen, it's not at the forefront at the moment. So the judiciary has had some positive movements in treating animal cruelty appropriately. For many years, they were not sentencing people or convicting people. It was sort of ignored, in my opinion. But we have a long way to go, and with the latest report on family violence in New Zealand, I think I completely support what the report says. We have systemic weaknesses that are contributing to a lack of early identification. And I think it's time that while we need to put children and partners and families at the centre, we can't ignore the role of abuse of animals as a contributor to that.
So, for example, if someone from an animal group goes to take a dog away from a house because there's been some cruelty, should there be a way of notifying other agencies that there's been an animal-related incident there, given the connection to family violence?
Completely. So in 2011, there was an MOU between SPCA and then CYF. That worked very well for a few years, but for whatever reason, that type of cross-agency or cross-organisation sharing has fallen by the wayside. So we have the blueprint there, but we just need to revisit it and get it happening again.
And would you like to see that?
Oh, definitely. This is just ridiculous in this day and age that we're not responding effectively and early.
And do you think by doing that we could help reduce family violence?
We could. The caveat to this, though, is that, so the Veterinary Association was quite amazing when my research was launched and they developed some resources for the vets. But we know that this is a wider systemic issue, and one of the problems there is you can be a vet, but you've never been trained in interpersonal communication and how to broach sensitive topics. And so what we've seen and continue to see is at the DHB level, people don't know, across different professional groups, people do not know how to actually identify and report, especially for low-level concern, a concern that could escalate. And I think while we can work at a systemic level and develop policies and information sharing, we also have to work at a training level and bring people up knowing how to communicate their concerns and do it in a very appropriate way.
And that is Michael Roguski from the Kaitiaki Institute speaking to me earlier.